The moment recording comes.
Yes, recording is started. Okay, so we can begin now.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. Uh, a very good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to see such a large number of people joining us this Sunday morning. Uh, there has been a little change in our schedule today. We had circulated that Mr. Ravindranath Reddy would be speaking to us, but he is little unwell. So I think the talks are going to be initiated by Mr. S. Gopalan, who was our speaker last week. And then there will be an observation by Sri Harsh Tankha, followed by some remarks by Mr. Rajaram Kudli. And if possible, Mr. Ravindranath Reddy, if he is present, he would also speak for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we'll open it for a general question and answer session. So I once again welcome everyone, including Mr. Gopalan, Mr. Kudli, and Mr. Reddy, who, in spite of his illness, is trying to make up and has perhaps come to our meeting today. Uh, and the and the theme of our talk today is memory, knowledge, and inquiry. So, with these words, I welcome once again all the speakers, and I would request Mr. Gopalan to please make the opening remarks. Mr. Gopalan, sir.
Thank you, Dubedi. Namaskar to everybody. The topic for today, which my friend Ravindranath Reddy had intended to talk about, was memory, knowledge, and inquiry. And so let me open this in the way that it strikes me. Most of what I have to say is actually has been discussed by Rajaram, Ravindranath Reddy, and myself. We used to keep meeting here before the lockdown every few days, and we have talked about all these things, which is why they will also add something to what I say. Now, memory, knowledge, inquiry, all three originate from the brain. So the brain becomes the focus of the discussion, really. Krishnamurti has made many statements between 1950s and 1980s. He made statements on mutation in the brain and in consciousness. He talked about computers and their implication on human living. He talked about genetic engineering. Now, is not an authority on these subjects, and he didn't give us some out of the world insights that he had in these areas. He used to meet with specialists, biologists, doctors, neuroscientists, other scientists, and in the discussions with them, he got to know what was happening in the world around him. And from that, he made these observations which came out as statements. Now, these statements have been made 40 to 60 years ago. In this period, science has moved ahead and has revealed a lot of its discoveries to us. Krishnamurti was spot on in most of his observations, especially the implication of computers on human living. But some of his statements need to be restated in the light of what we know? Because as we said, Krishnamurti is not an authority. Ultimately, we have to be a light unto ourselves. So, mutation in consciousness and the brain was something that Krishnamurti started talking about in the 1960s. And he made one critical observation: mutation is not a change. Change implies change towards something, whereas a mutation is a complete transformation that happens in the instant. It cannot have an end in view towards which you mutate. It happens. Now, one of the situations where mutation happens is when the observer is the observed. Now, this is a intellectual statement which we have endlessly debated. But the intellectual analysis and debate does not give the experience of the observer being the observed, where there is no separation. And when you have that experience, you can't talk about it while you're in it. You can only talk about it when you come out of it. So the actual experiencing is what really matters. It happens every day when we are in attention, when we are immersed in what we are doing, or even when we are in deep sleep. When we listen deeply to something, this happens. Now, listening is unconscious awareness. Is it possible to be consciously aware? Krishnamurti talked about this in some of his talks when he pointed out that if one can be so aware through the day, then whatever has to be coming out and being churned is churned during the day. The mind is quiet. Then at night, when we are asleep, the unconscious is able to send its communications into the conscious. If we are preoccupied through the day and haven't completed the work of our intellect during the day, then that carries over into the night when we sleep as dreams. So he seems to indicate that there is something called consciously awareness. Krishnamurti also talked a lot about meeting death. Now, there is nobody who exists in this world who has met death and has returned. Because you can meet death only when the body disintegrates. So, at that level, there is nobody who actually has had the experience of it. But there is a way of experiencing death, which is an ending. Is it possible to experience the ending of a desire, the ending of an emotion, the ending of anything, attachment? Not intellectually analyze and do it, but can you act? One can actually end it in oneself and observe. That's an experience of very close to death. In science, mutation is the main source of genetic variation. And therefore, in this entire process of natural evolution, mutation is an essential component of it. This mutation can be of two kinds. It can be somatic, which is only inside the body of the person, or it can be a mutation which is hereditary, which is passed on. But both these are only at the level of the physical body. There is insight and mutation can happen to anyone. And here I would like to give you a live story which is on YouTube. After I finish the talk, I will share the link in YouTube if you are interested to watch. There was a visiting physician that we had here at the Valley School campus. His name is Dr. Shirdi Prasad Tekur. He died last week on the 16th of this month of COVID related complications. This man, 40 years ago, when he was a doctor in the army in Mizoram, he had a life changing experience. And in different forums, when they had discussion, he has talked about it. In this particular video, this question was put to him: how does one face death? And he talked about how to do it for about an hour or so. And in the last 10 minutes of the video, he described his life changing experience and how, after that experience, the fear of death disappeared. So, that is a living story we have from just a week old. I'll share the link at the end of the talk. Now, Krishnamurti talks about mutation in brain cells. He talks about the fact that the brain cells themselves can change. Now, this is a statement which I think needs to be revisited in the light of what we have now learned in the last 40 years. What is the brain? Brain is an organ of the body made up of cells. All cells in the body are made of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and traces of some minerals. There are differentiated cells and undifferentiated cells. These undifferentiated cells are called stem cells. And only when the cell is formed is it undifferentiated. After that, it becomes a special cell, whether bone cell or brain cell or whatever cell. Then it cannot become a common cell anymore. But this differentiation is only with respect to the function of the cell. The material of the cell is the same, and the brain is made up of the same material: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and traces of minerals. This brain is therefore common to all human beings. There's no such thing as a human brain, but the functional aspect of it seems to become specialized in different brains. Then there have been discoveries about the brain itself. Scientists have estimated that we use hardly 10% of the capability of the brain. Scientists have discovered that there is intra-brain communication which happens through neurons, neurotransmitters, and exciters. These neurotransmitters and exciters are chemical interferences produced by the body itself. But the chemicals can be replicated, and this is what we do in the entire treatment of mental illnesses and stress. So, an example is dopamine and opioids. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter generated by the body. It works in some ways similarly to the way morphine works, which comes from the which is the from the plant-based source. So this implies that the food that we eat affects the brain, because the brain is built up of the foods that we eat. But there is a second level. Habits are behavior patterns that are wired so deeply in our brains that we perform automatically without thinking, without attention. Now, this allows the human being to follow the same route, which is we call neural circuits, to work every day without thinking about it. With repeated use, these pathways become deeper and deeper, and as they become deeper, they become increasingly difficult to get out. Therefore, lifestyle, whether we meet living out of habit or we meet living out of attention and as if it's the first time every time, makes an extraordinary difference. Neurogenesis is the science which talks about the growth of brain cells. Are neurons produced through life or only at birth? Now, this is a debatable subject. There are scientists on both sides of the fence. But we know for a fact that human beings age as they grow. Now, we also know that the brain has a left brain capability and a right brain capability. The left brain is more analytical, the right brain handles emotions and art and music and such areas. But this we know that in children, both these hemispheres are plastic. The division is not so clear. This division becomes rigid and separate as we grow. And that is really aging. So if you watch how a child learns a language, the child learns the language analytically and also emotionally. Therefore, a language which is learned very early in life goes in at a different level. A language which we try to learn later in life, which is mainly the analytical process, becomes a tremendous effort. So, is it possible to retain this plasticity of the brain as we grow older? Is it possible to produce new neural circuits as we age? That means, can we be aware of habit? And because when you are aware of habit, there is the possibility of a new neural circuit forming. Is this what keeps the brain from aging? Why do we need habit? Why do we need to do anything automatically? Is it not only from the standpoint of efficiency, multitasking, which is actually come to us from the machine world? We want a machine to be as efficient as possible. But is the human being meant to be a machine? One can, if one watches somebody who's recovering from a stroke, it's quite an extraordinary revelation. The person, however old he may be, has forgotten what it means, the movements involved in turning the body to one side, in taking the steps for a walk. He has to relearn everything. And because the brain is rigid, not plastic, that relearning is a tortuous effect. Krishnamurti talked a lot about computers and their effect on human living. He first talked about this in 1958 when he pointed out that machines are taking over the functions of memory. Now, at that time, there were no PCs. The PC came only around 1980. In the 1960s, you had only mainframe computers, which was available to big industries and research organizations. Then you had microcomputers, which were still in the realm of the business and institutional world. Individuals came directly into contact with computers only after 1980. But Krishnamurti made these predictions right from 1960 onwards. So he pointed out that what that these were computers were going to take over the memory of which is what the brain relies on. So would the brains of human beings atrophy? No, you can actually see that in real life. Capabilities that were taken for granted as part of human beings have today been lost. In the urban setting, you have everybody with a two-wheeler to zip from the house to the shop opposite the house. The practice of walking is being lost. So we have to take the car, drive to a park in the morning, do our 4 rounds round the park, and then drive back. But for every other activity, we have to walk. We have to take the car. We cannot walk. The moment this lift, the escalator or the elevator is provided, the natural inclination of the human being is to move towards the elevator and not towards the staircase. So the simple activity of cooking your own meal is getting lost. The younger generation today says, where's the time? We prefer to either get ready to food or order from a takeaway. So these simple acts is something we are losing. You probably have heard of Carl Jung, the mystic psychologist of the 20th century. Jung built a house for himself on the shores of Lake Zurich. He called it Bollingen. And in his towards the end of his life, he described what he did in that house. The house had no piped water. Water had to be pumped from with a hand pump. There was no electricity. Wood had to be chopped. The fire lit. He had to cook his own meals. And he made this statement: these simple acts make man simple. How difficult it is to be simple. So, has the computer taken away these simple acts which kept us alive and made us more and more dependent on technology? Then Krishnamurti pointed out that the way of earning a livelihood was going to change completely. Human beings were going to have more idle time, and therefore entertainment would increase. And he made a very predictive statement in a talk in Madras around 1980. Those are the only things we have left: entertainment or deep inquiry into oneself. So it's an either or situation. Either you are in being entertained or you are into inquiry. And let's not deceive ourselves. Even these meetings are one form of an entertainment. Whether the entertainment is religious entertainment or whether the entertainment is intellectual entertainment, it's still entertainment. Why are we here at these meetings? Primarily because we are not able to stay with ourselves. And this fundamental fact that we are unable to stay with ourselves is the cause of all the restlessness. So, does that need any action outside, or is it only an action of inward watchfulness? Krishnamurti also talked about genetic engineering And at his last talk, 4th of January 1986 in Madras, he talked about it very passionately. That passion comes through even when you listen to the video recording. But for some of us, uh, it's a deeper connect because we were there at that talk. You felt the intensity of what he was saying. He was saying genetic engineering on one side and computer on the other, when they meet, as they are inevitably going to meet, what are you as a machine, human machine, a human being? He asked this question. It's already happened. We have scores of viruses which are the product of the computer meeting genetic engineering, all manipulated by some intellect capability behind. And it's inevitably a crooked in a capability because it always manipulated. But in all this talk of genetic engineering, one aspect which came after the 90s and therefore did not get addressed was what we now call the field of epigenetics. What epigenetics is saying is that DNA is not king. It is the environment which decides which trait manifest. Just because those traits are in the DNA doesn't mean they manifest. So, this environment, and this is important, includes the emotional and the mental state. So, happy states, stress states, and unhappy states of mind all bring their own manifestations. So, what is the place of fear in the environment? What is the place of stress? Is it important to manage fear, manage stress? So when Krishnamurti talked about going to the office from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock for 50 years of your life, you can imagine what that was 40 years ago. Today it's going to the office or working from home 20 hours a day. What does it do to you? And what kind of traits, mutations, illnesses is it going to stimulate generate from the DNA inside? So, is it surprising that we have more and more serious ailments coming up? Are they coming from outside? They're coming from our lifestyle. Krishnamurti repeatedly mentioned in all his talks that memory is stored in brain cells. But this is again a statement I think that we need to revisit in the light of discoveries in the last 40 years. Memory resides in brain cells. This has never been questioned. The response always has been, where else can it be? Now, memory needs to be written in some form. Ancient man chiseled into stone, then writing started, images were drawn, and when the magnetic media came in, magnetic fields were created in which the writing was done on the magnetic field. Now, if something is written, it should be possible to locate. But so far, no evidence has been found of memory recorded in the human brain. The internet and the mobile phone have opened up different possibilities. The mobile instrument or the internet is simply an instrument which connects. It has a certain amount of what is called the random access memory, keeps the minimum memory that it needs to run, but whatever it needs, it downloads from some server outside of it. And medium of communication is the internet or the network, the mobile network. Is the brain such an instrument which connects up with the memory stored outside of it? Is this possible? You have the example of your mobile and Google Drive. When the link for this talk comes to you tomorrow, the YouTube link, what you get is only a link. But when you double click on that link, the video from YouTube opens, which is stored somewhere else in some other computer in some other part of the world. So, is brain also something similar which downloads what it needs from a collective consciousness which has all the memories, which then goes to say there is no such thing as an individual memory at all, which is what every religious teacher has been pointing out. This also has other implications. It implies that every act of every sentient creature is somewhere recorded in this collective, whether that person was aware of it or not. In the uh, Hindu mythology, there is the mythical person Chitragupta, the keeper of the records, and he is always visualized as somebody who looks like Ganesha, a scribe with a pen writing it down. That's the imagery that the human mind has created. But essentially, what it's saying is every single act is recorded and it is there. Today we talk of the Akashic records. So is it just a superstition or is it something that actually happens? Now we also know that memories are discrete, separate records. They are strung together by thought. I. So I am all the memories that I remember from my childhood till today. So it's the stringing together which gives the continuity to the separate, discrete memory. What happens when that I, that continuity is broken? Does that I end with death? This is the greatest fear of the intellect. And therefore, the intellect would like to invent a theory of reincarnation. Whether reincarnation actually exists or not, the intellect would like to project such a theory because it gives a feeling that I won't die, I'll continue in some form. Now, which comes first, the body or the mind? In the view of science, everything is body. In fact, mind is a recent entrant into the field. So everything is body. The working of the brain is explained through chemicals, which are neurotransmitters. Mind, thought is all supposed to be only in the brain. Therefore, with the I, all this must end in death. But in yoga, the human being is not seen this way. The human being is seen as a series of concentric circles. The outermost concentric circle is the physical body, the grossest part of it. That is what decays and dies at the time of death. So it's not that the body dies, but life energy withdraws from that outermost body, withdraws into the next level. And the next layer is the emotional body. So the emotional body continues. And deeper behind is another level, and it goes on in levels like this. The physical body is the one that produces sensations. So without the physical body, there are no sensations. So life as we know it doesn't exist without that. But since we have identified life with sensations and with the gross body, we tend to think that the ending of the gross body is the ending of everything. Whereas if invention, or I'm sorry, if the energy can collapse back into the subtler layers, it implies that that sense of I is not only in the body, it is in those emotional layers, it is in the even subtler layers, and it is this I which is holding on to the string of memories which it has selected from the collective consciousness. So that is the string that needs to be cut, in the term words of the seers. That string, once that is cut, then where is that continuity at any level? Uh, Krishnamurti had two contemporaries who lived at the same time as he did. One was Ramana Maharishi. And the Maharishi's message was just one: the world that you know is the world of your mind. This mind has to be destroyed to understand the underlying truth. And the other one was Sri Aurobindo, who kept pointing out that the transcendence of man as the consummation of terrestrial evolution, and that an emergence of an immortal, supramental Gnostic race upon earth was inevitably bound to happen. So this leads on to what all these teachers have advocated. They said, what is important in your life is sadhana. Now, we translate sadhana as effort, but effort is a practice that has a goal, as an objective. Is Sadhana is something more. Sadhana is actually the attitude of meditation, the attitude of receptivity to some higher silence and peace. And you want to encourage the entry of that energy in right through the waking hours. And one can only do that through an awareness of what is coming in the way every moment. So, encouragement through lifestyle, avoiding activities that pull one away, and satsang, the company of people who are similarly inquiring. This has always been the priority of sadhana. So, this is what I wanted to share, and now we can pass on to Ash, I suppose.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Very interesting talk. And I think you have given enough food for thought. I would like to mention that, you know, really interesting to find out where does this memory sit. We recall from memory and all that. But if you see the how the content of the consciousness gets created, before a child is born, the genetic conditioning starts gathering up there. And before he really becomes conscious of things around him, the cultural and social conditionings become a part of it. And then as he grows older, he collects all that. Now, all this becomes the content of his consciousness. Now, if there is no content, what is left there? It's pure awareness. So it's not that we are getting something like iCloud, you bring something on the computer and see what it is. This is really interesting to find out where all these experiences and our knowledge are stored. So it's a very interesting thing to be discussed. I think I'll invite Harshji to say something about it, and then we'll go to Mr. Rajaram Kudli. Harshji, please. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Very interesting, Gopalanji. You raised so many questions. I would love to be there close to you so we could meet regularly and go down many of the pathways that you've opened up for thinking about things. Particularly as Dubeyji says, I would also find it very interesting. I'll just give you a personal anecdote about where memory is located. Because recently, for coronavirus, just having time on my hands, I thought I would do something new and learn to play a musical instrument, which has never been part of my forte ever. So something new. And I started to play the harmonica, the mouth organ, because it's simple. And then to my intense surprise, as I became aware of this, suddenly whole tunes that I had last heard 40 or 50 years ago, I could suddenly play them. Once I began to master the instrument, they would just come out from somewhere. I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even have to think about it. So they have obviously been stored, not just in my brain, because so it is interesting whether there is a kind of collective mind in which memory is held. Maybe there is both. Maybe there's a local store as well and a collective store for memory. That is, rather like in computer. There is a hard disk, which is long-term store, but there's RAM, so the memory gets called up from the hard disk and into the RAM. It's not immediately available. And then once it's in RAM, then it's immediately usable. So it may work like that. But anyway, this is, but I was thinking that that I have to, excuse me a moment. My nephew's leaving for Russia this very minute, so I'll just say goodbye to him. And I'll continue if you will permit me. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. I won't see him for a month or so, so I thought I should say goodbye. Anyway, but then I thought, why are we talking about this? Why these words, memory, knowledge, and inquiry? And there's a lot to be said about it. Certainly, I've been very interested in this. I could go on for hours about memory, knowledge, inquiry. But then I thought that every time you speak, there is not just the word, but there is also the context, framework in which you're speaking, the situation, the location in which you're speaking this word. And because you can take any other word like love, it depends on what context we are using the word love. We might use it to mean different things. So I think it's important. This is context I'm speaking at the moment is in the context of Krishnamurti's teachings with a group who are interested in that. So I will try and see what is relevant for that. And the other thing that is always with a word is the subtext, the context and the subtext. The subtext is what lies beneath the word, behind the word. Why, what, and once again, in this context, the subtext is what is the connection of all of these things to the main concern of the teachings and hopefully of this group, which is the transformation of consciousness. So in the context of the teachings and with the recognition that we are talking about always in some way about the transformation of consciousness, as Gopalanji was as well. So I will try and focus and restrict myself and not talk too much about other avenues about this. So about memory, I think enough has been said. And I think the important thing is that there is a lot there in memory that we don't even know is there. And the distinction is made between retention and recall. We retain things in our memory. It gets stored there like computers. And then it has to be recalled. Now it's the recall process that is the more difficult process, in that we can only recall little bits at a time. And also, when we say we forget, we don't often we mean we don't recall. It may be there in our mind, and things can trigger that memory. Anything, sometimes smells, people say smells will bring back feelings that you had as a child. You smell some food that your mother cooked long ago and somebody else cooks like that, and it suddenly remind you and memories of your childhood. So my purpose in saying this is that there's a lot more memory around than we are normally aware of or conscious of. We're just waiting to be recalled. Then there is also, but that memory affects us in our daily actions unconsciously. Maybe we can call this the unconscious. It's just not there immediately apparent. So the same thing with thought. We generally, a lot of the time when we talk about thought, we mean the surface thought process, which is accessible all the time. I can always tell what I'm thinking if I focus on it. And if I try to be a little bit more aware, I can be aware of quite a bit of feelings and thoughts and images that are running through my mind and so on. So there is this ongoing process all the time, which I can be a little aware of or a lot. But there is a whole functioning of thought, which is really very deep, which already predetermines the way we look at things and the way we even recognize things. Even before it has come to our awareness, our brain has already shaped it in a way that conforms to what we've seen before. So to become aware of that process is very challenging. And it requires a lot of inquiry. I hope sometime, if we can, if you guys will give me the time, to actually demonstrate this for you, to demonstrate how the mind and the brain already configures things long before it has come into your awareness. So you see something to be true, but it's actually been modified by your memory. So anyway, so this is one thing about a memory that I wanted to point out, and thinking. And knowledge also is somewhat similar, but I think I'm always talking in terms of inquiry, really, because that seems to be the focus of this whole thing. It's the last word, but probably the most important word. That how does knowledge come into this? Now, the thing with knowledge is, if you look at the history of knowledge, we see that something quite remarkable happens in the development of man. Firstly, human beings are capable of storing their knowledge and then passing it on to the next generation in a compact form. And that's, in fact, some people say that is one of the things that distinguishes humans from animals, say. We're very limited in their capacity to store knowledge and use it, and then it's more immediate. And you can even see it in uneducated people or people who haven't had that much exposure to modern thinking, who live in remote places, that they don't store that much in their brains. They don't, maybe they do, maybe everything is stored, but they don't recall it. And that is part of knowledge. And what we have done, especially in the last 400 or 500 years, we have learned how to create a system of knowledge, accumulating knowledge that all interconnects, and everything interconnected reinforces each other. So we have scientific knowledge, a great body of scientific knowledge, or even knowledge about, I don't know, agricultural know-how, if you like, how to build things, how to make things, a huge amount of knowledge, and it all is interconnected. Everything supports everything else. My knowledge of science supports the knowledge of how to build things. My knowledge of the seasons, which is, and this knowledge is always increasing massively. That helps me to grow things. So we are set up an interconnected, self-supporting body of knowledge. And this is well on its way, especially with the internet, to becoming universal. So there is a body of human knowledge. Now, one of the problems with having a body of human knowledge is that everything new or that we come upon, consciously or unconsciously, we're always trying to fit it into this body of knowledge. That we want to see it in terms of, I don't know, we see something, some event occurring, and we think, oh, we must find a scientific explanation for it, or we must find a rational explanation for it. Or, I mean, there are people who will believe in revealed knowledge, that the gods reveal knowledge. I'm not judging this or saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying people also believe in revealed knowledge, and they try and understand the world around them in terms of this revealed knowledge, and they ask questions: why has this virus? Why has this happen to us? Are we being punished? Are we being, and so on? This is so this is important for us to understand, because knowledge contributes, of course, to tradition and to a fixed state of mind, which we then feel uncomfortable if we see anything new or anything fresh. We tend to want to look at it through the framework of what we know already, and what the framework of human knowledge that is already there. So this is now this, in a sense, against inquiry, because by its very definition, inquiry is into something that we don't know about. That's why we are inquiring. We don't know something. And here again, it may be known by somebody else. So our first point of inquiry is to see if somebody else knows about it. For a scientist, this is called research. He does research to see, searches to see, has somebody else written something about this particular phenomenon? Whether we are looking at human relationships, we want to know whether other people have encountered similar situations when we are, say, having difficulty in relationship or something like that. So this is our first impulse when we inquire, is to find out what. But I think what Krishnaji is doing, he's pushing us to that point where we don't know, where we actually don't know, where nobody knows, where somebody else's explanation is not necessarily going to help me, because it is something that I'm faced with and that I have to discover for myself. So this, to me, is the most important element of inquiry, that we need to push our inquiry to that limit, to that edge of knowledge, where, because knowledge is always limited. I think everyone recognizes that, and it's always growing. So we need to push to the edge of knowledge and begin to look at that area that is unknown to us. And we may find ourselves in an area which we can observe, which we can perceive, but which can't be converted into knowledge because it's too vast and too complex to put it into words or images or be captured by thought. Now, so I think when Krishnamurti is talking about inquiry, he is talking about this level, this extreme point of inquiry. And it's something, once we find the challenge of it, and we want to meet the challenge of it, we want to rise the challenge of it, then this is an inquiry that has to happen in every moment of our life. To have a mind that is open to the new, that is looking to see, and is not be tied down by tradition, by knowledge, by any of that. And that is the quality of mind that I think is required, and Krishnaji is wanting us to cultivate. So I think that is probably enough for me to say. Yes.
Thank you, Harshji. Thanks a lot. I think before I request Mr. Rajaram Kudli, I would request Harshadji to say something. He wants to make some observations. Harshadji, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are you able to hear my voice?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
About the memory, I had met one person called Pandit Gopi Krishna, and he has written many books from his own experiences about Kundalini. And after many years of this experience, he began to write poems. He did not make any effort, but the poems came to him in languages which he did not know, which he had not learned. So it seems like human brain or mind is in contact with many things which we have not experienced personally. And one book which I read by Dr. Brian Weiss, its title is Many Lives, Many Masters. And in that, when this doctor was treating one patient, one lady, and the doctor tried many traditional methods of psychology, psychiatry, but it did not help. Then this doctor put this lady on hypnosis, and so many memories begin to come from this lady as if she was describing the previous lives, and she was also telling which place, which year this was coming from. So there is so much stored in our brain or somewhere which we are not in touch with, but sometimes people can get in touch with. And about the mutation, I feel that there is this energy which goes to the brain, and the brain, some changes, maybe structural changes happen or quality of the brain, and it affects the way we look at everything. And that energy, we can call it whatever name, but I am speaking from my own experience that the brain becomes very highly vibrant, and one looks in a different way than one looked before this thing happened. So there are mysteries, like even when Krishna ji was going into some process, a different voice was coming, the voice of the child, and he seemed to be in contact with some masters, and he was saying something like, they are coming, when Krishna will come back. So there are lots of mysteries as far as the mind is concerned. The brain, one scientist can investigate because it is a matter and it can be investigated, but the mind is a real mystery. And the mind cannot be understood by the scientist, um, because in understanding the mind, there is no distinction between the subject and the object. So when a person wants to look at his own mind, the mind is the subject and the mind is the object. And so it cannot be studied. The mind cannot be studied scientifically. That is what I'm trying to say. Okay, I have finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashad Bhai. Mr. Kudli, would you like to say something, sir? Please unmute yourself.
Yes. You can do this on video also. Am I audible clearly?
Your voice is echoing.
Is it better?
Yes, you are audible already.
Okay. Is it still echoing?
It's not very clear. There is lots of echo in your voice.
So this is the new system. Is it okay if I continue like this? There is no other, I don't see any other control.
Sir, voice is not clear. Your voice is not coming. Voice is not clear. Some problem at your end.
Is it okay? Stay like that.
Better, yes, that is better.
Okay. So, listening to the talks by Gopalan sir and Harshji and Harshad sir, some key points I thought I should mention is that what is the purpose of inquiry seems to be one concern. If accumulation of knowledge or organizing knowledge, it seems to be inevitable. It's a habit of the human, nature, or almost the way the modern human life is progressing. Organizing knowledge seems to be inevitable. And with organizing knowledge and organizations to manage the knowledge, dispense the knowledge, all the corruption of organization also seems to be inevitable. Then there is this question of religious inquiry versus scientific inquiry. And to me, it looks like any kind of inquiry into discovering something unknown is of the quality of the mind which Krishnaji has been seeing. Just now what we heard from Harshad sir, we have all heard many artists, performing artists, musicians, scientists saying that I didn't know where it came from. Whenever there is a discovery, whenever there is a creation of a new music or new art, new performance, they say, I also don't know where it came from. Many poets have said that. There are a lot of living legends who say that. That is the indication. Similarly, with scientific and mathematical discoveries like Ramanujan and so on and so forth, even Einstein and so on and so forth. That's a quality of mind which was just inquisitive into some observed phenomena, and there is a revelation. So such discoveries or revelations have occurred to only those minds which had the quality of inquiry without any self-interest. But then immediately the nature of the mind, human mind is so. Write it down, publish it, make it into organized body of knowledge, and then there is a need to convert that into something useful. So inquiring into this phenomena as a scientist and researcher and artist, when I got into that, I found in some Buddhist literature, now it seems it is so obvious thing that the caveman or the predecessor of man, there was this always, the survival instinct. So he was always looking, inquiring into what is causing the discomfort or what are the dangers posed to his survival in the immediate environment. It could be poisonous creatures. It could be impossible terrain. It could be seasons like rain and the winter, the cold, and sunshine and so on. By experimenting with whatever was available that would increase his comfort or reduce the insecurity or increase the chances of survival, he discovered some knowledge about the nature, passed it on to his next generation. He was also able to convert that knowledge into some inventions, covering his body, building a building, protecting his family, and so on. Now, by the evolutionary theory itself, whatever gets used grows. So with good results he was getting out of this phenomenon of observing, making deductions, remembering, making knowledge out of that, experimenting with nature to increase his chances of survival, chances of not dying accidentally or in a painful way by poisonous creatures or wild creatures or by the fury of nature, with more and more usage and successful usage of this memory, thinking, projection, and converting that knowledge into something useful that will help him survive better, these faculties have to grow. That is the nature of revolution. Now, at some point of time, it has grown out of proportion. That making knowledge out of observing nature, making things out of that which will increase the comfort. The question of survival has been taken care of long, long ago. But then this movement of the mind to go on discovering, inventing, converting that into something, and then there is competition, and then there is greed. So somewhere it has taken that, it has crossed the threshold, or it has taken a turn towards, that momentum just working for the sake of its own nature. Go on discovering, go on inventing, go on creating, go on selling to increase the chances of survival. Today, none of those, most of the reasons for insecurity are not there. Or because of this uncontrolled movement of the mind, the way it is working, we have created, the mankind has created artificial divisions where large section of masses are actually driven back to that level of insecurity, as we are right now seeing. The survival itself is seriously in question. So therefore, the central question to me, which is not easily resolvable, is what is the purpose of this action?
Mr. Kudli, I think because of poor audio, many people are not able to hear you at all.
वॉइस बहुत लाउड है, इको भी हो रहा है, तो सुनाई नहीं दे रहा बराबर. People are not able to listen to the audio itself.
They are not able to
Okay.
understand. I think there is some problem with the audio.
Okay. So, let me speak lower and see if this works.
I try with the lower volume. Let's see.
Yeah. Is this better?
No, I think the voice is breaking, and there is lots of echo. We have difficulty in really understanding what you're saying.
Okay. I think then it may not be very productive to continue. So I was trying to, point out or express what I see as the central question is what should be the purpose of this inquiry? If the knowledge making is inevitable process, then what is the purpose of this inquiry? That is the question I have.
Yes. Maybe you can write a few points and send it to us. We will circulate it among the participants.
Yes, sure. We'll do that.
Thank you. Anyway, we'll go to the questions now. There is a question from Mr. Rama Rao, and then Mr. Harishwar Singh. Mr. Rama Rao, please go ahead, sir. Please unmute yourself, Mr. Rama Rao.
Sir, my question is that can the thought can itself can see itself? That is a question to the Mr. Gopal.
We talked about this last week when we said that thought is only an instrument and perception is happening at the level of the energy of life itself. So can that perception see that thought is limited and still continue to use the instrument? Just because the instrument is limited doesn't mean you discard it, but you understand this is what it can do and only use it where it can work. Why use it in areas where it's not meant to be used?
Thank you. I think we'll go to Harish ji and then to Durga ji. Yeah, Harish ji, please.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to touch upon a couple of things. First of all, profuse thanks to Gopalan sir for giving us insight into quite a few things. But let me ask very humbly. I don't know, last time we discussed a lot about insight, but there is a loose end that needs to be tied. I'm sorry to use this phrase. And that loose end is insight is always into something. And insight into a particular thing may not lead to wisdom. I am very sorry to use the word wisdom because Krishnaji avoided it. Wisdom is a loaded word just like God. Krishnaji talked of intelligence and this, and he said, of course, he said that that intelligence is the only security. But he also clarified that that security is not of the self. And that is why in one of the student talks at Rishiveli, when a student cornered him, challenged him, Krishnaji, you have never lived in India. The morality and the integrity you are talking about stand like a rock, stand like a rock in the midstream. If you do that, you can't survive in India. Krishnaji said, why not? He said, you will die. And Krishnaji quipped, I will die. Fine, I will die, but life will go on. I remember after I heard it, for days together, I kept reflecting on it. What is the good of life going on for eternity or for billion years? I mean, 5 billion years, I suppose that is the amount of gas, hydrogen gas in the sun. So what is the good of that if I am no more? But, and still I am left with that question. But life will go on. So that security is not of the self. So, and at another point, Gopalan sir said that, so there is nothing like individual memory. It is collective memory or collective consciousness. In one of Brockwood Park talks, and which Krishnaji repeated at Rajghat, I remember very clearly in the 80s, he said, and some of you who have read it may recall this, he said, scientists were making experiments on rats in England, and they were horrified to see that the behavior of rats in the USA lab was changing. So it doesn't mean that we can deny the memory of those particular rats under experiment. There is no big deal. The only thing is that, yes, there is individual memory, of course, but that memory is also linked to some collective memory. And again, that collective memory is also linked, maybe linked to some cosmic consciousness, which is nothing but pure emptiness. But to me, they are irrelevant. Why? Because that is all academic. So I will only focus on the last thing, which I think everybody has missed. And that is where Gopalan sir's whole exposition terminated at, when he said, whether it is Krishnamurti or Raman or Arvinda, if you consider all that together, ultimately it boils down to one thing, a life of sadhana. And sadhana, he equated with effort, or some people call practice. I beg to disagree with Gopalan sir, but that is, I beg to disagree, not, because it gives me a lot of kick, I get high, not because of that, because probably it is linked to our transformation. Inquiry or sadhana is not effort. It is a question of attitude. And let me please allow me to, when Richard Alpert came from Harvard and he questioned Neem Karoli Baba, why do you insist that I should clean the floor and toilet and this and that? I do that in America. He said, yes, but that is a self-centered activity. Have you noticed some change? So yes, when I do this, I remember it is an act of love. He said, yeah, that's it. And that is seva. So you can do the same thing. It is a question of attitude. Now, since I have hardly any savings and I have no pension, I have to keep teaching. But is it possible that teaching is not a means of my livelihood, but teaching is my sadhana? So to say, I say, so to say, teaching is my joy. Teaching is my way. Teaching is the very breath that I breathe in and breathe out like that. So basically, sadhana, it is a question of direction. All our life we have been going towards north. and we can still continue to go north to the outside world. We will still be looking after our family and all that. But then I know in my heart of hearts that I'm not going to north, I'm going to south, which is the area of not knowing. And to say only once to oneself that I don't know. And probably the next thing I can say, and the only next thing, I wish I knew. And let these two questions keep burning all my life. And probably that is sadhana. There is nothing a question of any practice or any inquiry or anything. Thank you, sir.
दुबे सर अनम्यूट कर लीजिए। दुबे सर अनम्यूट करें।
Good morning, sir. I hope I am audible and all. Yes, it's a very interesting talk, and in one go, with such a good flow, you have brought home a lot of points. Actually, I just would like to add 3 points, sir. I think the teaching and Krishnamurti's books, they all touch at different states of life and maybe at different states of mind, and whatever your intention may be, whatever your direction may be, but as long as it is there, we are connected with it. I think with that, whatever that is inquiry is there in your mind, it will come to its natural conclusion one day, because the force with which you want to pursue your inquiry, I feel that is the secret of it. These are all my perceptions, sir. I just would like to say, like when you said about simplicity, simple living and all, so I just would like to say it is the simplicity of the being also counts, sir. Like, that's what he says most often, he says, be simple, sir, So like I consider myself a very simple human being, and I have only concern for my daughters and my family, the well-being, that is the love I have for them. And I don't have any problem in worshipping any god or finding security in that. Because for me, the theories and whatever the principles, they don't count. It's love, in the same way, love of the teaching, maybe what is he saying, love for K himself, maybe, what is he saying, what does he want to communicate with us, that kind of inquiry was triggered, long time back. And I can make out that, it's understanding oneself. It's only reading your book of your own life that is there. So in understanding oneself, I feel that is his entire thrust is on thought structure, how thought at different stages, how it is, it empowers us, and it is ability to see the thought structure and not getting fallen into the trap of the thought. I feel that is the essence the teaching is pointing out to. My experience is very limited, and only thing is my only contribution. I can say that I'm passionate about finding out. That's all. So it's understanding oneself, and in and ego. The self-centered activity, the egoist activities, are the problem which don't allow anybody to go further. And once one is able to see all that in its slightest and subtlest ways, maybe things start falling in their place, sir. I just would like to add this much. Otherwise, it's wonderful listening to you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Gopalan sir, I would like to ask, kindly elaborate what is the exact inquiry and what finally you are suggesting.
Actually, Harish ji misunderstood what I said. I ended with sadhana, emphasizing that sadhana is not effort, that it's a state of receptivity where you are open to intimations that come from deeper levels. But everything that we do consciously from the intellect works against that. So the only thing we can really do is keep being aware constantly how the intellect comes in the way. which is what I talked about last time when I said, does intellect continuously obscure the insight, which is the very dimension quality of the living energy, which is always a part of us?
So what is the final inquiry, sir? And what are your suggestions?
I'm nobody to give suggestions. I'm only asking, can I be aware of this constant interference by thought intellect? Now, what benefit will I get from it? That's a commercial question which comes from the intellect role. So why does everything have to have this commercial dimension to it? Can I just ask, why is this thought interfering all the time? Because it is preventing me from understanding or living with that state where it is the thought is quiet.
Thank you. I think we'll hear Harshji now, hear the question, and then we'll go to Mr. Pradeep Verma. Yeah, Harshji, sir.
I wanted to respond to Harishwarji. As a fellow teacher, I taught at Brockwood for many, many years. And a couple of things during that time that Krishnaji said were very important to my whole approach to teaching. So I'll offer them to you. One was he said about Brockwood. Brockwood is a place for learning the art of questioning, the art of exploring, which is what we are talking about just now. It is a place which must demand the awakening of that intelligence that comes with compassion and love. So as a teacher at Brockwood, this is what he was asking me to do. Directly, not just something I read in a book, sitting there with him. He was saying this is, and I taught mathematics. And this is what he said about mathematics. He said, in the mathematics class, your main concern is not mathematics. That you will teach. Your main concern is the awakening of intelligence. So this has to go along side by side, even as you are teaching the mathematics. You are alert to that possibility. You're inquiring, you're looking, you're seeing how to awaken intelligence. And that is what I try to do in my years there.
Thank you, Harshji. Thanks a lot. Mr. Verma, please.
Yes. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes, sir, you are.
My question is to Gopalan, sir. He talked about epigenetics, the latest, wherein it says that environment is solely important, more important than DNA, nucleic acid. So I always thought about it in my research career. Environment has to be very important because all the signals, the life has to survive, and the signals, it is dependent on the whole. So this is a holistic way of looking at it, that signals come from the environment through membranes and all that. So this is the work by Bruce H. Lipton's work. And interestingly, the main question is, Krishnamurti never gave a very respectable position to belief. And Lipton's book says the biology of belief. This was the book he became famous with. So the biology of belief means the belief system has a strong enough role to change the biology and the genes. So our conditioning based on our earlier belief system, whatever it is, shows that it is in some sort of prominence in us that keeps on disturbing my perceptions, my listening, in everything. It's an impediment. So biology of belief. So somewhere positivity, what people today talk of conscious evolution, So something, whether through belief, one can mutate, one can change the brain cells through belief system. That is what first question is. And that is all I think. If it is clarified to me, the role of belief, which has been negated all through.
Varmaji, what I would only like to ask is, belief is something communicated to us through knowledge. When you start inquiring into that belief, are you following the belief anymore? So, can the belief be a starting point for inquiry? And ultimately, it's inquiry which brings in the insight, not the belief. The belief was only a starting point. The belief may be correct, it may be modified, it may be wrong. That's a matter of detail. We're not interested in that. So, why should we negate a belief? We negate anything which says accept without inquiry. When you inquire, then it's at that moment it's a living reality to you. You don't need anybody's statement about it anymore. Isn't that perception?
Yes, it is okay. But the role, whether belief can alter biology, that is my moot question. Any type of belief.
Yeah. Inquiry can alter. The starting point for the inquiry can be a belief. Belief by itself is not going to alter, but can the belief be a starting point for inquiry? Do we have to say that all memories are stored in the brain because Krishnamurti said the brain cells carry memory? Or can we listen to that, understand that that was the scientific understanding 40 years ago? Today, the understanding is that memory can be stored outside. It's possible. We don't have to believe anything. We just have to keep living in inquiry. That's my suggestion.
Inquiry is okay. But what about, suppose I want to change these brain cells to start with something very positive suggestions, right? Which may have a basis somewhere in belief system, as I believe that environment must be important, which was proved much later on. So likewise, what you call belief or insight, something tells you that this must be happening, which may not have an authentic experimental proof, but you do believe something which comes from nowhere, and ultimately it is proved. So likewise, some positivity, so-called positive, rather transforming, desired transformation for the new society as a belief system, or rather as a something can be induced to change, to do that transformation in individual, of course, to start with.
Can I put it this way, Varmaji? You are on a journey, you discover something, and you put a signpost for the person who's going to come behind you. That signpost is the belief. But over time, the wind and all the environment turns the signpost in different directions. So there's no assurance it is pointing in the way that you intended to be pointed out. But you put a marker that, look, this needs to be something that you need to validate. So if you validate every belief through inquiry, which means also understanding how this person came upon this belief, what was his experience. You have to recreate that story. Only then does the belief open itself out, and then it's no more a belief, it's your discovery. So it's discovery, discovery, discovery all the time. The belief is the starting point, it's a signpost. That's how I would look at it.
Practically, conditioned person, it's not easy for a conditioned person like DNA. DNA was considered the sole thing for decades.
Yes.
Then, so this will not allow you to question it, right? So likewise, this belief system is definitely a blockade for things to see fresh. So likewise, uh, when it becomes belief, which is practical, when it becomes belief, which is practical.
Why should any belief be practical? See, when you say it's important to be a light unto oneself, it means I don't sit and categorize beliefs as important or minor. Every statement is a starting point, but it's my life, my living. I need to take the responsibility of my understanding for that. Why take on something? You see, it's a shortcut. I don't want to take the trouble of investigating, so I'll accept whatever you say, right? Then you have started onto the journey of following. So there can't be selective following and selective belief. I think inquiry means inquire all the time, every minute. How do I even know that I have another minute left? So I have to inquire every minute.
I think it's very rightly said. Thank you, sir.
Some other day.
Yes, yes. Do we have any questions? In case we don't, I think, Jan Saab, we can close it now.
Yeah, sir. Time is already over, 12:29.
Mr. Dubey, if you don't mind, we had said that today's talk was by Sri Ravindranath Reddy, and we would give him a chance to add something if he'd like to. Can he at least have the last voice?
Sure. But I don't see his name in the list of participants.
His name is given as Ravi on the screen.
Oh, okay. So, most welcome. Where is he? Let me unmute him.
Youngest photo is there?
His name is Ravi.
Youngest photo is there?
Okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't take your name.
That's all right, sir. That's
Not
all right,
written
sir.
fully. So
Namaste and
I'm happy you are able to be with us in spite of your illness. So go ahead and take as much time as you can. Yes, please go ahead.
okay. There's nothing much to say now. Quite a bit has been said. Thank you very much and good afternoon, everybody. And when I gave the talk, I was telling Gopalji that an inquiry, which is what we are interested in life, based on our experiences, all the hardships one goes through and all that. So one goes into inquiry, but then this inquiry is dependent on either a teacher or a seer or some knowledge. And so anyway, at one point for me, after having met Krishnaji, though it is definitely there, others have also said it, that knowledge seems to be a hindrance to inquiry. So I was thinking that just about what everything we know, in fact, is it that our very existence is knowledge? So that if you take the word I, does it stem from knowledge? I think we all can logically agree to that. So this is the whole thing that was interesting for me to find out. Is there something, is there an approach to the inquiry? Of course, most of it would still be knowledge, but is there an approach or a side of which one could be aware, alert, which may be knowledge, but which need not be knowledge in its entirety? So that was the interest, and I think Mr. Harshji told, I had this is one of the first talks I agreed to speak, and I just recall, didn't happen, and it was sort of getting blocked. So the first point was, how is it at all possible to inquire without memory? That was only the practical side of it. Anyway, so one of the things, in fact, forgetting or not trying to say what I've already jotted down, one of the things that occurred to me um, with a few questions, and especially Rajaram was saying this, that I'm looking at, let's say, okay, one of the questions is memory and knowledge different? This is one of the first things that occurred to me. And I in fact said maybe both are the opposite sides of the same coin. So one could not say that one exists without the other. So one of the other things that I listened to was that the place of knowledge and memory. And Gopalan sir and the others, went in quite detail about this memory as, a part of the brain, part of the human being. And of course, the question of whether it exists inside or outside, that does not matter. But what occurred to me was that it looks like the brain and the memory are like hardware, and the knowledge was like the software. And we are so much so interested in this brain and memory. And actually, when we are dealing with computers and other things, maybe this is actually true. It exists. There is a hardware that exists, and hence software is loaded, and then there is a function of that. But for us, what happens? So one of the thoughts that occurred to me is this knowledge which I am acquiring, listening, gathering, using, is this the one that actually keeps my memory the way it is? My conditioning, my inattention, all that. So there is nowhere one could alter your brain. There's no way one could alter one's, go and you can't do anything with the brain as an organ. Maybe you could do a little meditation and, anyway, do all these things which sort of are very temporary, take medicines and all that. But is what I'm feeding to the brain the very essence of that memory, the very essence of that brain? So could one be alert, or is that whole thing about one being alert to this day-to-day activities, the attention or the inattention that one does not carry? Is this the whole thing that shapes the memory and hence shapes your conditioning and hence, the way we live our lives? And we forget this. And, though we read about it, though we hear about it, because we directly try to record it to the memory, then this memory is definitely not available at the instant that it is required. Let us say something happens very suddenly. This memory is definitely not there. It's because it's sequenced in a very different way. So probably this, one of the things that I get out of the talk was that, is it to be alert that the whole thing finally depends on what one is interested, what one wants. And even knowledge, for instance, I feel when we listen to Krishnaji and when we have listened to a lot of other people, it is the knowledge that we store. But is there that extraordinary message? Is there that something extraordinary in that message which we can decode, which we can, bring it out as not knowledge, but as something that could be possible, to further, bring awareness or insight into our being? So I think it's too late, and rather quite a bit has been said. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Gopalan sir, for covering me. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Raviji, for the closing remarks. There is one more question coming from Mr. Harishankar Iyer. Sushilji, can we allow one more question, please?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Iyer, please unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead and ask.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So this question I am asking Mr. Gopalanji. Okay. The way I understand the whole theme of this today's discussion is that the limitation of knowledge. The knowledge acquiring process. Though we start from a clean slate over a period, we keep accumulating a lot of things. And when we start listening to Krishnamurti's teachings, we are also shown the red flag when it comes to this accumulation process of the knowledge. Though we are thoroughly doing it, we are also shown that this is the knowledge which ultimately ends up in being your conditioning. Okay, knowingly or unknowingly, your content of consciousness is this knowledge gathering process. Knowledge, when I say it also includes the experiences and so many other things, the mind activities. Okay. I was also told that even Krishnaji's one of the discussions with David Bohm on the ending of time is that what is the ultimate endeavor a human being does on his quest for truth is to end the knowledge. Like what he said is ending of time. The same way he is also talking about ending of knowledge per se. He used the word Vedanta, ending of knowledge, Anta. Okay. So having said that, now all along, right from our student days and even now or even a few years later, we are looking for these kind of knowledge. Even reading Krishnamurti is a kind of knowledge at some point it comes. My fundamental question and dilemma is, if this knowledge has to be discarded for what it is, to be to find the pathless land, which is the truth, then why do we even get into this knowledge seeking? At any time, whatever you are going to get is also going to be limited. That we understand. As we gather the knowledge, we also understand that it is going to be more and more limited. And a person who is uninitiated, has not gathered the knowledge, living in a simple monastery or a village, he doesn't go through the cycle and then trying to empty it. Now we are all accumulating and parallelly watching it and trying to empty it. So what is the difference one has to comprehend between the uninitiated and the one who has initiated and is trying to empty that knowledge, that is the content of the consciousness, in the quest of the truth? This is my question, sir. Thank you.
I got your question. See, what we are really trying to do is to create an image. We listen to Krishnamurti and then say, there is this field on the other side. How do I get there? So we create a concept out of it. So we are always working with concepts and working with words. And therefore, can we understand this fundamental way of working of the mind, which starts acting and obscures the truth? That is the negative approach, the path of negation. Can I just be aware of the mind rising and clouding my insight? Again and again and again, it comes back only to one truth. There is an insight which comes from the life energy, which is able to perceive, and the mind rises in between and obscures that. Can I be aware of that rising and why it is rising? What is that motive behind? Can I just continuously be aware and let the awareness have its own action? Can I experience this for myself?
I just want to add to what Mr. Gopalan has mentioned. Krishnaji has never denied knowledge. In fact, if you see his life, he was always surrounded by people who were highly intelligent, and academics people who had a name in the field of academics. But he always tried to convey that you must know the limitations of knowledge. Unless you keep the knowledge in abeyance, you can't reach that which is unknown. So one has to see that in that perspective. I remember in the first and last freedom, when Aldous Huxley had conversations with him, he says, can you put your knowledge of botany behind and look at this flower? That is the limitation, because our knowledge always comes in the way of seeing things as they are. That is the problem. I think we can close at this one. Thank you, Mr. Gopalan, Mr. Kudli, and Mr. Reddy. I'm sorry I didn't request you to come earlier and speak to us because I got confused with your name. But maybe some other time when you are well, we'll hear you again. And once again, I want to thank everybody for coming today. Thank you so much. Bye.
Next week announcement. Next week announcement, sir.
Okay, next week
Next week announcement.
Yes, next week we'll have Mr. Kiran Khalap. He'll be speaking to us his own experiences of listening to Krishna and coming and meeting him and so on. So next week at the same time, we'll hear Mr. Kiran Khalap. He's in the field of publishing and publicity. So we'll be hearing him next Sunday, same time. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Dubiji. Thank you, Dubiji, very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to everybody. Please close with somebody.
Okay.